I had believed that a failed marriage was the deepest form of pain. I was mistaken. The true heartbreak, it turns out, is when your own child orders you to leave the house. You helped him buy, calls you a parasite, and looks you in the eye. Ethan, my kid, ceased to be my son on that day, and I quit acting like nothing was wrong. Let me go back a bit. I had just returned from my final workday. I worked as a live-in housekeeper for Catherine, a wealthy older woman, for over 10 years until I quit. Not because I lost my job, not because I was worn out, but because to Catherine's death, I wasn't prepared for what she left me. Really, far more than I could take in. However, I kept it a secret. Not quite yet. I had planned to return home, take a little nap, and possibly assist Ethan and his wife Nicole with their pregnancy. I envisioned a peaceful phase one in which, after 30 years of unrelenting giving, I would at last receive some care. What did I get instead? Why in the world would you leave that position? The moment I told Ethan that I was no longer employed, he lost his temper. That amounted to $8,000 per month. Are you going to sit around and do nothing right now? As soon as I walked through the door, whatever warmth I felt vanished. Nicole didn't wait for my answer at all. Professional care is necessary for postpartum recovery, she stated bluntly. Margaret, you are a housekeeper, not a nurse. Susan, her mother, then leaped in as if she had been waiting to do so. There's more to caring for an infant than just bottles and diapers. It's a science. You must receive training. They weren't simply brushing me off. They were preparing to evict me courteously and in the name of practicality. I suppressed every caustic response that attempted to escape my lips. I simply nodded and grinned as if I hadn't heard their 3 distinct insults. All right, I replied. I won't interfere if you've already made arrangements for assistance. Susan's reaction? All right. However, you will pay for the baby nurse and the nanny. I'll be in charge of hiring. I was taken aback. Pay for it? They asked me to cover the cost of the baby's care even though I wasn't permitted to be near it? Ethan went in as if everything had been decided. That's right, Mom. It was wrong of you to leave that position. Right now, we truly need the money. At that moment, it struck me in the chest like a brick. They didn't want me to return since I was related to them. I was a walking payday, so they wanted me back. I was 58. I had been employed all my life, cleaning the houses of others. Kneeling, lifting, cleaning, and cooking. Conserving. Sacrificing. For Ethan, I made eye contact with him. I muttered, I'm retiring. Now is the moment. Nicole laughed so hard it could shatter glass. What is retirement from? You have no pension at all. My throat became parched. I answered, You told me not to pay into one, claimed that it was wiser to assist with your mortgage payment first. You pleaded with me, stated that we will work things out later. Nicole's hair was flipped. Yeah, well, your earnings weren't particularly noteworthy. Then Ethan snapped again, as if on cue. Enough, Mother. Nicole is upset with you. She is attempting to conceive. She is under stress because of you. We greatly need assistance at this time. You're still in good health. You could work for another 20 years with ease. Don't start talking about retirement until you're 80. I went cold. One more. 20 years. I have no words to express how that moment felt. Empty, chilly, as if the floor had been torn out from beneath me. He was telling me that I wasn't done yet, even though I had sacrificed everything for him, including my marriage, my youth, and my own life. I was not permitted to sleep. I was merely a machine that had not yet malfunctioned. I gazed at him. Do you truly believe that's my only skill? He appeared uneasy. That isn't the case, really, because that is precisely how it feels. I refrained from crying. Not quite yet. However, something broke inside of me. Silently. Indefinitely. Then, with poison syrup and phony smiles, Susan took over once more. Margaret, it's not that we don't comprehend. However, exercise realism. There isn't any extra space here. Surely you can't expect to stay forever? I remained silent. She went on. I know a family that is actually looking for a live-in assistant. Excellent compensation. Board and room. Win-win. You might contribute back here and assist with their household. Nicole grinned. It's truly flawless. You've already completed that task. Nothing fresh. At last, I said something. I refuse to work in anyone's home again. Never again. Susan squinted her eyes. Well, perhaps you ought to investigate one of those assisted living facilities. A few of them provide work for housing initiatives, kitchen assistance, cleaning, etc. Nicole folded her arms. That makes sense. You can't rely on us to cover your accommodation expenses or anything. You would be doing your share of the work there, at least. My chest swelled with anger, but I maintained my composure. I looked across at Ethan. Do you honestly believe that sending your mother to a senior living facility to clean floors so she can take care of herself is acceptable? He refused to look into my eyes. Be practical, Mom. You've always expressed a desire for independence. He took his phone out. A slot is open at the moment. I called already. As he began calling, I gaped in shock. I gave you everything, Ethan, I murmured, my voice trembling. I spent all of my money on this house for you, and now you want to get rid of me like a burden? There was a glimmer of shame in my eyes. Then it disappeared. It was replaced by rage. He kicked my bag so hard that it slammed into the wall of the corridor. Do you believe that I owe you anything? Do you really believe that I asked you to waste your life for me? You and Dad got divorced. You broke us. Everything was damaged by you. His voice was low and poisonous as he moved closer. For the rest of your life, you owe me. I gazed at him. I adopted a boy. I breastfed the infant through surgery. I loved the child more than I loved myself, and I didn't recognize him at all at that precise time. After he kicked the suitcase, I remained silent. My belongings were crushed against the corridor, like someone had thrown out a piece of trash, and I just stared at it, thinking, and so it finishes like this. Not in a dialogue. Not with gratitude. Only a door smash and a shove, Ethan remarked. Don't look at me like that. Do you believe that you are the only person who has ever had to make sacrifices? Do you consider yourself a martyr? I didn't respond. Why argue with someone who has already changed the past in their own mind? It is comparable to yelling into the sea. With her arms folded, Nicole walked next to him. She had that expression on her face whenever she felt that she was being reasonable, the polished cruelty of someone who has never experienced hardship in her life. She remarked, You're acting too sentimentally. All we're requesting is some accountability, responsibility. It was a slap of a word. I felt like screaming. I wanted to take her by the shoulders and tell her all I had done over the previous 3 decades. Each and every meal, each banknote. Every time I neglected to pay for Ethan's school sneakers, I missed doctor's appointments. Every time I cleaned their fucking grout or patched the roof, my knees were already screaming. However, I didn't, since I was previously aware of their lack of concern. Nicole and others did not perceive sacrifice. They perceived usefulness. They discard it like a receipt as soon as it ceases to be useful to them. Ethan combed his hair with his hand. This is getting out of control, you see. We are unable to provide for you. I apologize if it sounds harsh, but that is the way things are. I gave him a direct look. Ethan, you don't have to stand by me. You didn't. He scowled. Why are you making this so hard, then? I answered. Because I made you, and now I'm not sure what you've turned into. He winced. He twitched all over, as if my words had struck a chord he wasn't ready to face. Nicole interrupted. Let's not make this too dramatic, okay? We will assist you with moving if you are unwilling to make a financial contribution. You can't stay here, though. Like a vulture circling new roadkill, Susan, who had been passively observing the entire time with her false sympathy look, added her voice. A social worker is someone I know. She specializes in providing older ladies with transitional housing, senior citizens. I was 58, not 98. However, I could feel every year in my bones at that precise instant. I was being pushed off the edge, as if I hadn't earned every single step after spending the previous 30 years ascending a hill. I didn't even realize I was on. They had no desire for a mother. A throwaway employee with a guilt trip was what they were looking for. Slowly, I nodded. All right. Do you want me to leave? All right. Ethan let out a sigh of relief. I'm grateful. I'll make an Uber call. I walked past him and muttered, Don't bother. I'm going to call someone who doesn't consider me baggage. I picked up my phone, went outside, and sat on the front steps with my bag next to me, which was still scratched from Ethan's kick. The driveway was covered with lengthy shadows as the sun began to set. I came to the realization that I had nowhere to go. Not because I had no other choices. However, I hadn't allowed myself to get ready for this, because I still thought there was a limit they wouldn't pass, despite all the warning flags, including Susan's disdain, Ethan's entitlement, and Nicole's coldness. However, there wasn't, and I was solely responsible for my naive faith. I pulled out my phone. Before I remembered, my thumb was habitually hovering over Catherine's number. She had left. The only person who had truly seen me in the past 10 years was Catherine. Actually noticed me. As a servant, no, as opposed to a bank account, but as a valuable human being. The letter she left me crossed my mind. The one that was hidden in her jewelry box's back. I've read it 3 times since she died, and each time I've been even more shocked. I can't express how much I owe you, Margaret. In my last years, you provided me with dignity. I lived longer thanks to you than the doctors anticipated. When mine failed, you provided me with family. I have modified the will. Everything you require is available in the attorney's office. I still hadn't told anyone. A part of me considered telling Ethan about it, so he could see that someone finally valued what I had contributed to their lives after all these years. Now, though, I knew better now. They had no right to know. Not Ethan in particular. It buzzed on my phone. He texted, "On Saturday, you can return for the remainder of your belongings. Tell me the time, please. No, how are you? Where do you intend to stay? Don't apologize. No embarrassment. Nothing. Only the logistics." For a long time, I gazed at the message. I then removed it. I used the card Catherine's lawyer had created in my name to check into a small extended stay motel that evening. After taking a shower and putting on the hotel robe, I stood barefoot in the little kitchenette and gazed at nothing beyond the window. I wasn't damaged. I was finished. I'm done acting like this family could be saved. I'm over the idea that love always prevails. I'm done justifying a man I grew up with who has turned into a suit-wearing stranger. I grabbed a glass of the free wine from the mini fridge and held it up to the mountains. I muttered, to Catherine, "You noticed me. Thank you." I slept through the night for the first time in years, free from tension, earplugs, and waiting for someone to knock on the wall to ask where dinner was. Ethan wasn't in my dream either, not once. My face was warmed by the sunlight. When I woke up the morning after checking into the motel, not a warning, not a bang, no stress. Simply be silent. I perched on the edge of the bed, stared at my phone, and brewed a cup of weak hotel coffee. No messages. Not from Nicole, not from Ethan, and not even from Susan's passive-aggressive emoji. The quiet was deafening. However, it was preferable to phony goodwill. I entered the lawyer's office that Catherine had sent me to months before to her death at 10:30 a.m. Since the funeral, I hadn't been there. Everything was clouded by grief. Now, though, I was prepared. The receptionist's overly nice greeting was reserved for those who don't look like they belong in waiting rooms, with marble floors and cappuccino machines. I was given an envelope with my name handwritten on the front 5 minutes later when I was in a quiet workplace. There was a letter inside, and a paper, 2 pages, but it was a game changer. To Margaret, I hope this brings you the tranquility you always deserved but never asked for. I appreciate you treating me with respect, for remaining after everyone else had gone. When no one else would, you loved me. Then, a check, and verification of the complete transmission of inheritance. Everything was left to me by Catherine. The house in town, the cost savings, the financial commitments, even her guest bathroom's fucking artwork. Blinking at the numbers, I sat there. Not a billionaire's life-altering sum. However, for someone like me, it was sufficient to purchase a house, launch a company, continue to live a dignified life, without making another request of anyone. And the most exquisite aspect? Nobody was aware. Ethan was unaware. Nicole was unaware. Susan was definitely unaware. They thought I was broke, so they had thrown me out like trash, assuming I would crawl back. I wasn't broke, though. I simply didn't tell them. I returned to the hotel by taxi. I didn't have a racing heart the entire time. I didn't have trembling hands. I wasn't even in tears. I sensed, evident, as though the mist had finally dissipated. I made a reservation for a short-term rental downtown later that day. Above a bakery that constantly smelled of fresh dough and cinnamon, there was a bright one-bedroom. I made an upfront payment of 3 months. At the pile of invoices, the landlord blinked. "Are you certain about this?" I grinned. "Definitely." I returned to the hotel, took out my notepad, and began compiling a list as I waited for the area to be cleaned. Not a list for revenge, not a scheme for payback. All I wanted was a list. What I required, what I had spent 30 years ignoring. For the first time in my adult life, I asked myself, "Margaret, what do you really want?" The response was delayed and unapologetic. Ethan sent another text 2 days later. "Tell me when you're ready to pick up your belongings." According to Nicole, the guest room will be cleared out the next week. The guest room, the one I'd slept in for the past 10 years. Cleaning, living in, like a renter in the house I assisted in purchasing. I didn't answer. A follow-up arrived an hour later. Additionally, would you be able to Venmo Nicole for this month's grocery runs? During the first week, you continued to eat here. Halfway through a scone in the bakery, I burst out laughing. A deep, sincere chuckle that caused the barista to look up at me as if I had gone crazy. He requested that I Venmo them. For food. After I was thrown out, I didn't respond. I had too many words, not that I didn't have any. However, not everything is worthy of a reaction. They should be kept at a distance. I got a new phone plan at the end of the week. New phone number. A new bank. Every document has been updated. Every hint of a relationship with Nicole and Ethan was washed away. The contact for emergencies was no longer me. Plan B is no longer an option. The ATM is no longer available. I had left, and I didn't feel invisible for the first time in years. I felt invincible. I mailed something as my final action of the month. Not to Ethan, not to Nicole. To Susan, however. Only one envelope. Just one picture. A copy of the transfer of inheritance. Not a word. No justification. Don't be sarcastic. Just the facts. Give her that to sit with. Let her know that the woman she referred to as a burden now has more money than they all put together. I didn't have to make a fuss. For me, the quiet would suffice. On a Wednesday, I moved into the apartment above the bakery. It had a kitchen that was just large enough for one person to move between the refrigerator and the stove. White walls and scuffed wooden floors. It was mine, though. There is no strain. At dinner, no passive-aggressive looks. When I sat down on the couch, there were no sighs. The fragrance of fresh bread wafting through the floors, a used bookcase, and me. The first entire day was devoted cleaning. Not because it was filthy. However, I was doing it for myself for the first time in a long time. Not because I was afraid of criticism or because anyone expected me to, but because I finally had room to breathe. Possibly even belong. I brewed a cup of tea about 3 p.m. and watched the street below, where people were coming and going, from the window. Here, nobody knew me. Nobody was expecting anything. Nobody would come to my door begging for time, money, or favors. It was both gorgeous and terrible. It buzzed on my phone. I didn't recognize the new number. I nearly disregarded it. However, curiosity can be amusing. I took it up. Nicole's tight, sweet voice said, "Hello? I've heard you've moved." I remained silent. She went on, obviously uneasy. "We were just curious if you could lend us a hand for a few weeks. The nurse we hired failed, and the baby is due next month. We're in a bit of a jam." My gaze was fixed on the window. This woman, who had told me I was worthless and should go live in a nursing home, now needed me because her first plan didn't work out. But I remained courteous. "Be calm. Did you not mention that professional experience was necessary for postpartum care?" A pause. "Yes, I mean it. However, we have faith in you. Your family, of course." Family. When she said that term, it sounded different. Like a tool rather than a bond. I took a drink of my tea. Allow the quiet to linger long enough for her to perspire. "Nicole," I continued softly, "you expressed your feelings about me quite clearly." "I didn't mean," I said. "I understand exactly what you meant. And you're not incorrect. I'm not a nurse. I don't work as a caregiver professionally." It was almost as if I could hear her fumbling. That is no longer the focus. Simply put, we need someone we can trust. I glanced down at the passersby. I used to disregard all of those lives because I was too busy tidying up someone else's. I answered softly, "Well, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You always do." Click. I put the phone down and took a deep breath. Not a trembling breath, not one filled with regret, guilt, or uncertainty. Just quiet, pure air. I enrolled in a pottery class 2 weeks later. Something about using my hands to shape clay, losing control, and allowing chaos to take shape felt therapeutic. Karen, the instructor, was a woman in her 60s with hands that told stories and hair streaked with silver. We clicked right away. After class, we would go get coffee, discuss everything, nothing, life, books. For the first time in years, she asked me who I was and not what I could do for them. One day, while enjoying her latte, she said to me, "I wish I had your kind of peace." I chuckled. Peace wasn't cheap. I went to Catherine's former townhouse toward the end of that month. It was unused and sat quietly. The white shutters, the ivy growing around the front, and the brass knocker she kept polished even though no one used it were all exactly as she left them. I stood for a long time contemplating at the front gate. I could take up residence. Make a sale. You can rent it out. Rather, the first made a call to a nearby charity organization that assists women who have aged out of foster care. These are the ladies who, like me, were overlooked. The director and I met, handed the keys to her. I said, "Use it. Ensure that someone who requires a second chance is safe." She gave me a look as if I had given her gold. Perhaps I had. However, it was just space to me, and I had already discovered mine. Then I met Ethan one early April morning. I had just left the bookshop. He appeared to have gone weeks without sleep when he entered, carrying a little baby carrier in one arm. Our gazes met. He stopped. I gave a nod. He was not smiling. Nor did I. There are too many unspoken words between two strangers who share the same blood. He remained silent. He didn't say sorry. He glanced back at me after glancing down at the infant. And there was something in his eyes that wasn't pride, rage, or coldness for a brief moment, a blink. It was remorse. I said nothing at all, simply turned and left. I also didn't turn around. I had another dream a week after I saw Ethan outside the bookshop. No more visions of slammed doors, kicked suitcases, or the reverberation of "you, oh me not the haunted kind." These were easier dreams. In a garden, myself, kneeling in the ground, unclean hands. My back feels warm from the sun, not a voice. Don't judge. The sensation of something developing beneath my fingers. I therefore purchased plants. At first, too many. Flowers, herbs, and some unpronounceable green stuff. Overnight, the windowsill of the apartment became a miniature rainforest. I didn't give a damn. I enjoyed the craziness. It had a living quality. My quality of sleep improved. Did I forget something? I woke up without the momentary terror that used to strike before my eyes even opened. Have I let anyone down? Did I do enough cooking, cleaning, and giving? I had heard that voice for decades. It was silent now. I went to the post office one afternoon. A thin line. The elderly man in front of me was talking to the clerk, as if they were old wartime friends. The cashier grinned when it was my turn at last. "That large mansion was donated to the women's shelter by you, correct?" I blinked. "Yes, but I didn't believe anyone was aware of it." She gave a nod. Word spreads. It was a lovely thing to do. I was at a loss for words. I believe I simply grinned and remarked, "It felt right," since it did. There was no performance. It wasn't charity. It brought closure. I received an email back at my apartment that evening. From Ethan. I opened it after a lengthy moment of staring at the screen. "Hello, Mom. I have no idea where to begin. I've made 5 revisions to it. The infant is doing well. I'm not doing well, and neither am Nicole. For a while, she lived with her mother. I only wanted to apologize. For everything. For the way I addressed you. For who I become. You weren't worthy. Furthermore, I have no idea how to fix it. I still wanted to say it, though. That was it. Don't beg. No coercion. No come help with the baby, please. Only words. Simple and bare. And, perhaps, truthful. I took a while to reply. Like a stone in a stream, I let the message to remain in my inbox. Instead than hurrying to pick it up, let the tide of my new life flow around it. I did write him back a couple of days later. Brief dot measured. Thank you for your message. I wish for you to become the father you desire to be. The apology is important. However, it takes more than just words to restore confidence. Look after your youngster. Improve your performance. All I ever wanted was that. I didn't message anyone else. I didn't see if he responded. I didn't wait for indications of effort or change by hovering over the screen, like I used to do when he was a youngster. I no longer had anything to prove. There is nothing to defend. Nothing needs to be fixed. That year, I celebrated my birthday by myself. Just alone, but not lonely. Voluntarily. I visited the lake, brought a book and a sandwich, listening to the wind rippling the lake while sitting on a bench. Not a candle. No pictures. No phony giggles. Just tranquility. A woman pushing a baby stroller went by. She grinned. I returned the smile. After that, we both continued with our day. I knew I was getting better because of that. No pain. Avoid becoming envious. No idea of what may have been. Just the calm delight of what I'd created without anyone's consent, and the complete acceptance of what was. The season changed from spring to summer. Lemon bars replaced cinnamon buns in the downstairs bakery. People wearing sun hats and sandals crowded the pavement outside my window. I opened the windows more frequently. Allow the wind to enter. Let go of the past. I had stopped waiting for anything. No call, not pardoning. Not a big apology that would turn back time and return me to the child I used to know. The period of my life where I continued to be there for folks who only came to me when they needed something was finished. And there was no altercation at the conclusion. There was stillness in the conclusion. And truthfully, they never gave me a better gift than that. In a grocery shop, I once ran across Susan. She was struggling with a non-functioning credit card at the self-checkout, wearing one of those sweaters that wealthy women wear when they want to appear just like everyone else, with their hair frizzed out and their jaw tightened. She noticed me, stopped. I smiled at her, just like I would at a neighbor I hardly knew. Neutral, courteous. As if she wanted to say something, she parted her lips. Then she didn't. She went out. I continued to look at my fruits. Sometimes that's how healing manifests itself. Not fireworks, not retaliation, just showing no interest whatsoever in the power struggles of others. I also ran into Ethan again. Online, not in person. I received a link to a post from someone I met in pottery class. A public Facebook tirade about being a single mother and how some people abandon you when things get hard was posted by Nicole. Her pals mainly expressed sympathy in their comments. A few of passive-aggressive insults. I quickly scrolled past it. Not even satisfaction filled me. Simply verification. Their entire life, which they created by treading on me, was already collapsing. I didn't have to destroy it for them. On their own, they were doing a great job. A few months later, I received an invitation to speak at a small local gathering that featured a panel discussion on women's recovery from loss. I nearly declined. I didn't believe that I had anything important to say. However, I went. A room full of women was in front of me. Others are younger than 30. They were all carrying something, sadness, rage, and tiredness. When you've been there yourself, you can sense it in the air. I said something along these lines when it was my turn. I believed that love was due and that the sacrifice would finally be repaid throughout the majority of my life. In actuality, though, some people are only capable of taking, and they will take everything, including your serenity, if you don't stop them. It's not noisy to rebuild. It's not a speech, a scene, or the conclusion of a film. It is silently brewing tea. It's refusing without feeling guilty. It's not responding to a text that would have crushed you in the past. Forgiveness is not required of those who have never begged for it. Simply put, you must no longer allow them to occupy your soul. You regain your life in this way. And I meant what I said. The bakery is still where I reside. Continue to sip inexpensive wine. My toast still burns twice a week. There are so many herbs on the windowsill that I will never use them all. I can't bring myself to throw away a chipped mug. Additionally, I go to the park every Thursday to read while sitting beneath the same tree. It's not glitzy. However, it belongs to me. And it's sufficient. Ethan is not someone I despise. Not that I despise Nicole. I don't miss them, though. And that's the biggest indication that I made it out alive, in addition to the time they broke me. However, the versions of myself that kept returning in the hopes that they would alter, they didn't. Yes, I did. I'm also not returning.